It's really, really wonderful to have everyone joining us again in our Wednesday sessions. So hopefully we all drop whatever it is that we had before now, whether it's great or bad or whatever it is, and just be at the present with ourselves and with each other as we welcome today's speaker, Amaranatho from Netherlands. Our session today is how to stay calm and connected in complex situations. So how do we actually bring our practice off the cushion into our everyday lives, which I know I'm personally super interested in. So really keen for today's topic. So a little bit about our speaker today. Amaranatho is head of faculty and leadership for Blend Associates Ltd, which supports public and private sector leaders and teams in the UK, Europe, and the US. As a mindfulness-based executive and agile mindset coach, he supports executives, leaders, and teams to stay calm and connected in complex situations using PlayfulMonk approach that he developed. He started his working life as a technical support manager, and this took him on a transformational journey from getting a degree in AI to world explorer and spending 15 years as a Buddhist monk. During this time as a monk, Amaranatho has edited 2 books by Ajahn Sumedho, one called Intuitive Awareness and The Sound of Silence. He brings his experience of solitude and dealing with uncertainty to a variety of industries, from education to IT tech companies, where he has coached founders of large startups, HR executives, and cybersecurity teams. So as always, this will be an interactive session. We'll start with a short meditation. Amaranatho will introduce the topic, and then Tina will jump in and facilitate the talk. If you have any questions or comments throughout the session, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing them with everyone, you could also send the questions anonymously to Tina. And without further ado, over to you, Amaranatho. And I hope I haven't been saying your name wrong the whole time.
No, you've absolutely said my name completely right, Amaranatho. It's really lovely to be here with you, both sort of in person and virtual, and kind of amazing what we can do with technology nowadays. Most of my time I am in front of my laptop like this. It's really delightful to be able to connect back to Australia. It's a country I hold dear in my heart. And really, I love the land and the people there. So I thought we'd start off with a guided meditation. So if you just make yourself comfortable, sometimes we immediately assume a position, and I'm asking you not to do that. I'm asking you just to settle into where you are now and what you might need to do to feel comfortable, and that your body is sort of fairly centered, that you're not hurting your neck by keeping it sort of upright, and that you just are able to relax your body. Also, if you just mute yourself if you're online, so that so we keep the noise to a minimum. And in this willingness just to orientate towards the body and how you are now. So for me, this is morning time. I'm starting my day. And for you, this is evening. So we've got slightly different energies. So just this ability and willingness to connect to your breathing. If you're used to doing this, then maybe you can connect to the breath through your nose and notice how it comes into the belly. And as we do that, we have this connection to the physical, to our bodies. And just this willingness and open receptivity to the way things are for you right now, however your day has been. And just noticing the tension points that we sometimes have in our bodies around our shoulders, necks. How your hands are, whether you're clenching your hands or they're relaxed. Legs, knees, ankles, and feet. So we're not trying to get rid of anything or try to remove anything or try to be the perfect meditator or practice mindfulness in some fantastic way, but just to see how you are now, to receive yourself fully with kindness in the present moment. And however your mind is right now, whether it's jumping around like a monkey swinging through the trees, or whether it's focused on one thing that's concerning you, or it's peaceful, just to allow that into this space, this receptive, welcoming and open space. So as I do this, as I orientate towards the present moment, I hear this thing called the sound of silence. And I'm hearing it right now as I talk. And if you orientate yourself towards your hearing, you might hear this high-pitched tone. So you can't demand that you hear this. You can't make yourself hear it. But if you do hear it, I'd like you just to sort of rest in it. What I notice, it's not even really in the hearing. And if you're struggling to find it, or you think that it's wrong, or I can't hear it, just let that all go. The sound of silence appears through deep relaxation, even though what might be happening might be complicated and upsetting. So hearing the sound of silence is like sitting back in a nice, comfortable sofa. This spacious sound. And again, if you get distracted into your thoughts, this willingness to come back to your return to your breath and your body, the here and now. And if you're really struggling with your thoughts, if you've had a really busy day and something's upset you and your thoughts are bouncing around like a ping pong ball, then just place your attention just below your belly button. So these are different instructions for different people. You can pick out the one that's going to be helpful for you right now. And if all of this is confusing and you're thinking, God, what's he talking about? That's totally all right as well. And you can breathe in and breathe out with all of that. I'm asking you just to trust in your own experience, to receive yourself fully in the here and now, that this is the way it is. And if you are hearing the sound of silence, this cosmic high tone, sometimes they say it's a middle C, and just notice, where does it start and where does it end? How big is it? So what I notice is that it's large, spacious, has no beginning or end. Receives all of me in it right now, the thoughts, my personality, my excitement and nervousness about being here, the way that my body is this morning. It's a cold morning here in the Netherlands. Allowing this all into the space. So I often think that the way that I guide meditations is like an airplane, is to get you up into the thermals and then you to float around. So I'm just going to let you float around in this space as a playful exploration. I'm just going to be quiet for a few minutes, just to trust yourself, to let your natural capacity to reflect, inquire, and if you like, heal, Just to trust that. So just notice where you are right now. Whether you're with the sound of silence or your breath. But notice they both have the same qualities. The breath receives you with no judgment. Sound of silence receives you with no judgment. Doesn't expect you to be anything or anybody. Doesn't expect your practice, your mindfulness practice, to be good or bad. It can be good or bad. It doesn't matter. It can be a good day or a bad day. You can have nice thoughts or unpleasant thoughts. It receives it all. Awareness, this basic trust in awareness itself, not trying to get something out of meditation, but just to notice how things are. This willingness to be with what is. And whenever I explore in this way, it always leads me back to our basic human kindness, metta, this unconditional love, of which we all have access to and is always available for us, our basic self-compassion. So maybe you just like to thank yourself for turning up today. Thank yourself for organizing your time. Thank your body for what it does for you. Thank yourselves for organizing the way that they do in your body. To thank all the people that support all of us in being able to get in here today, the tech people that run Zoom, for example. the internet people, all reliant on each other for this to happen in this single moment of kindness. But to start with ourselves, this, our own wellness. Through our willingness to meet ourselves as we are. And if for some reason today it's difficult to give that to yourself, just be okay with that, that's okay as well. So as a plane lands, as we're landing and maybe we're going to come back together, just to notice again your physical form, the way that you're sitting on the chair, maybe your feet are on the floor or cross-legged, and really notice the earth element, the heavy element in your body. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come into the room. And in the virtual space that we're in, when you switch on when you open your eyes and come in, maybe you can just look at somebody else in the room. And in the physical space, you just turn around and just look at each other. We're all here together, and including me and us in the hybrid world through the screen. So there's a sense of just connection. So thank you all very much for that. It's a pleasure to be with you in this way. So in this space of mindfulness and awareness, I thought I'd just speak into this space now. We'll just see how long it goes for. I'm not intending to speak for a long time. And I'm intending to speak today in the tradition of the way that I was trained as a monk, which is I haven't planned this talk at all. So this talk is by reflection. So what I mean by reflection is that it requires your participation in the sense of your attention and awareness. And what I recommend is that you split your attention. You spend maybe 60 or 70% on yourself and 30% on what I'm saying, and to notice how that whatever I say impacts on you. I'm not offering instructions or telling you how to do it, but just for reflection, to notice how what I say affects you. And then at the end of this talk, we'll have a question and answers or a discussion or a conversation around what I've said or questions that you have. I'm very open and happy to discuss that. So this morning, when I was sitting down having my lemon juice to start the day, I was thinking about, what would be helpful to speak about. And I noticed my own expectation about coming here to speak. I don't speak so much in Buddhist centers anymore since stopping being a monk. And I connected with this theme of expectation in myself. And I really think that we can have all sorts of different expectations about our practice, about being mindful, about being aware, what meditation is and what mindfulness is. And after all the years of my training as a monk and continuing to use that practice in the work that I do, I notice that the expectations in a way haven't changed. They're complicated. You ought to be like this, you should be like that, you ought to do this or do that. But what is interesting for me is that this awareness has not changed. When I joined the monastery in England, the only thing the abbot of the monastery said was wake up, was find out what this awareness is and live from that place. And that's sort of my, again, and trust that. That's my encouragement today, is to trust in awareness, not trust in your personality or views and opinions, or even culture and society, but to trust in awareness and live from that place. So sometimes we can think that if we have a mindfulness or meditation practice, or practice metta or loving kindness, that everything's going to be okay, that our bodies are going to be okay, we'll have peaceful minds, the society will be all harmonious, and everything will work out okay. Well, the reality is, for me, is that hasn't happened. And I've rarely seen that happen. Because the nature of the world and the environment we live in is one of change. Things change. Like, I'm no longer wearing my monk's robes. I'm no longer a monk anymore. You know, I can remember my time as a monk clearly. I can remember my time when I spent time in the forest, thanks to the kindness of the monks at Bodhiana monastery in Perth. I spent 6 weeks in the forest there. I can remember my time in England, the many 3-month solitary retreats I would do at this time of the year in England, through the generosity of all the people that supported me. You know. And when I think about those times, I always think, oh yeah, this would be the week where we would start a 3-month community retreat. And my fear about what's going to happen, and being quiet for 3 months, or in some cases being completely alone, where I did my solitary retreat, where being alone for 3 months. So those fears and worries and concerns, excitements, they're always happening in the personality. It's always going up and down. It's like this or it's like that. Well, when I tune into this sound of silence, this awareness, this pointing out, the sound itself can change, but the awareness of that doesn't. It's ultimate peace. In fact, it doesn't even have a label. It has no conditions. It has no qualities. So it's really, how can one trust in that? Whenever I think about the sound of silence, I remember my entering the monastery as a novice monk. You'll wear white, and I moved in and lived with the monks at that point. And I came into the room that I was allocated as a monk. It was on a busy corridor. The monks had rooms next to each other. I opened the door, got into this new room. It had a very thin mat on the floor, and it had a radiator in the room. And I went in the room and I heard this sound, and I thought, there's something wrong with the radiator, you know. But I said, I thought I'd give it a few days. But actually what it was this sound of silence. The noise was so loud in my hearing, I thought it was the radiator. And so I've learned how to trust and be aware of this sound in all sorts of different situations. And this way of orientating towards life, of including both, is paradoxical, because we can be a complete mess, or we can be really all together and it's all going well, and yet the sound of silence is still there. So the reason that I chose this title of Stay Calm and Connected in Complex Situations is both that sometimes when we talk about mindfulness and meditation, we often associate it with calm, but calm is the starting place. It's not the end place. It's the starting place of being able to notice and reflect and understand and be with how life is. It's not that your personality may become calm, although it can do. It's that you notice what calm is. Awareness itself is actually calm. It doesn't do anything. And through noticing that in the human realm, calm and our nervous system, there's been fantastic insights through neuroscience about the way that we are able to stay calm. And the first part of our nervous system, which comes into operation for us to calm down, is through connection. It's through this ability to be with each other. And many of our technologies, although they seem to try to connect with each other, they don't do it in this deep way of us seeing each other, or being, of belonging, of connection. And so we can do many things for ourselves even before we start a sort of a formal meditation practice of being with one another, of being in community, of having friends, partners, somebody to trust. And so many of the situations that we're involved in are really complex. They're not easy to understand. There's neither right nor wrong. And dealing with complexity requires us to experiment. And the word that I like to use for experiment is play. When I lived in the monastery in England for 10 years, and then I traveled around the world as a freelance monk. And as a monk, I used to write rap for some of the interfaith events that I went to. And I went to one interfaith event in London, and I read one of these raps. Well, I rapped it. I didn't read it, I rapped it. And a guy came up at the end and he said, I really like your rap. What's your website? Can I download it? I said, I don't have a website. He said, oh, you must have a website. So he said, why don't you come round and we'll talk about it? So I went round to this person's house, and I didn't know he was head of an advertising agency in London, and he helped me develop this brand called PlayfulMonk. So what does PlayfulMonk mean? So as a monk, I was the Playful Monk, and now as an executive and leadership coach, I use the PlayfulMonk approach. But play is this way of responding to life. And all the events that I ran as a monk involved play. Play is the best place that we can learn. It's full of experimentation. It's including the body, and it's relaxing. So, and then monk is this mindset of reflection, of contemplation, of inquiry. And when we allow ourselves to calm down, this natural ability to reflect appears. You might notice this morning, I in my business, I post on this thing called LinkedIn, and this morning I was talking about awe and gratitude. Like when we have these moments of awe, we see something amazing, our minds open up, and immediately there's some sort of insight, or there can be. And it's to catch that, to observe that. And that's this ability to contemplate, reflect. What I'm asking you to do right now is just to notice how it is, how the talk is, and see what arises for you, and then to be able to distinguish between your personality, what you think and feel and know, and between the knowing, the actual real deep understanding of who you are, of awareness itself. And so this playful play and playful monk approach is what I've used in many of my events and things that I ran. I ran these family camps at Amaranatho in England for many years and worked with young people. And what came out of that approach was like what we're going to do maybe in a minute after this talk, which is co-exploration, that we explore together. We come into relationship with each other, and then play is about how we can use our bodies and have fun, experiment, be embodied. And then the third thing is love. How can we be kind to ourselves? How can we recognize our abundance? And through that, we have this capacity to share. For many of us, self-compassion is such a tricky thing to do. I've certainly struggled with it, you know, how to be kind to oneself, how to say, oh, it's all right, Amaranatho, you know, it was a bit of a tricky day. You know, this week, I've had a very difficult week this week with things going on. And it's just like, how do you just say, okay, it's all right, you know, both for one's personality. And yet when I open to awareness, awareness doesn't care. It has no interest in whether it's right or wrong or good or bad or things happen that went well or wrong or any of that stuff. It's just how it is. So when you bring these things together, you get presence, which is your ability to be with any situation, however it is. You can just be, you can be with it because you're doing it already. That is how it is. And what I, you know, in terms of personality, I like to see, you know, where that, how difficult it is for you to deal with these things. Like personally, I've found and I've used psychotherapy and psychology as a complementary to my mindfulness practice. And most of the things that the work that I do, and I do now, is a mixture of both mindfulness, being open to awareness, and nurturing the body through embodiment, through the physical sensations and being aware of the thoughts and observing, and then also using the great tools of psychology and psychotherapy to help you understand and decouple yourself from your personality, so you can work with it and understand it. And for me, this has been a really tremendous benefit for myself and also for the people I work with. And now I also as a coach, I'm a coach, and I also now supervise other coaches. So, like in terms of their own well-being, and it's being able, then you're also tracking yourself, you're tracking somebody else, you know, and you're resting in awareness. And this is all possible just by starting off by noticing how you're breathing. Your breathing completely adjusts your physiology. It's quite amazing that just being aware of your breath can completely change your mind state, can change the way that your mood is, and can change the way that you relate to your own thinking, and then of course other people's thinking, you know. So maybe we don't completely change the world, but we change the way that we relate to the world, and through that we can do great acts of kindness and can have an effect on the way the world is. So this encouragement around trust, how do you trust yourself, is to get to know yourself as well as possible, like to become your own friend, to sit next to yourself, like as if you were sitting on a bench, saying, you know, hey, Amaranatho, how are you doing today? Like getting to know yourself. One of the first long silent retreats I did, was in England on a remote farm. I was completely by myself, and I had somebody bring me food once a month. And I was a novice monk then, so that allowed me to cook my own food. So after as a Buddhist monk, you know, you don't eat after midday, and so I was cleaning up in the kitchen, and I heard this voice in my head which said, you know, you haven't cleaned the pots properly. And I turned around, I was like, is there somebody in the room? Like, And for the first time in my life, I really heard my inner voice. And I was really able to capture that and just notice, oh, who is that? You know, is that the voice of a senior monk? Is that the voice of my dad? You know, is that the voice of, you know, some authority figure telling me how it should be? For the first time, I could really see clearly, this is what's driving me. These voices in my head. Sometimes we think that we shouldn't have these voices in the head, you know, but I think the more voices that we know, this is brilliant sanity. It's not insanity. The more that you can clearly know how your thought process is and what voices are driving you, the easier it is to discern when they're not there. Because there's many times when those thoughts are absent, when those voices are not there, and actually we're at peace. But we're not trained to recognize them. Our society is built on division, on separation. So, you know, there's lots of, I don't know how it is in Australia, but certainly here there's lots of talk about Prince Harry and, you know, all these, his story and, you know, great headlines, but they have to be divisional. They can't say, well, actually he's peaceful and everything is okay, because it wouldn't sell a newspaper. And it's the same way as when we think, our thinking is based on, particularly in men. I work a lot with men. In fact, I'm one myself. But men put things in boxes. You know, we compartmentalize things. So getting out of those boxes and seeing things in a more open space is really helpful. But knowing yourself, knowing your voices is how you can also liberate yourself from, oh, there's that voice again. Oh, isn't that interesting? You know, oh, you need to be like this, or the world needs to be like that, or your friend needs to be like that, or your parent or your child or whatever it is. I've worked with so many parents over the years. My little Johnny should be like this. Why? Why? You know, why do you need to be like that? So the sound of silence and awareness, it gives you space to receive all these voices, not to recognize them and not react. And by not reacting, of course, they can dissipate, they can arise and pass. And that's what we do when we train with our breathing. We let things arise and pass. Our breathing's doing it all the time. We don't control our breathing. Well, you can do, but your body will suffer. It comes in and goes out. So why not let your thoughts come in and go out? Why not let your voices come in and go out? Oh no, I think, oh no, this is a really important one. I need to be like this, you know. I have to be like that. It's really important for me. Is it? Does it really need to be that way? Do you have to be that way? Do you have to be that way for your parents, your children, again, your co-workers at work? So what would it be like to be authentic and vulnerable and open? Brené Brown says, vulnerability is our most accurate measure of courage. Vulnerability is our most accurate measure of courage. In the 10-day retreats I used to run as a monk, they were both silent and had interactions. And I encouraged everybody to watch Brené Brown. She gave a very famous TED talk, one of the most listened to. It's a very important talk because so much of our world is around not being vulnerable, not being authentic. The world can impose this on us. You must be like this, or you ought to be like this. I just encourage you just to be yourself and get to know who you are, and let that shine, so you can recognize your own wisdom. So as usual, you know, you say you give a short talk and you ramble on. So I'm not going to ramble on anymore because I'd like to speak with you all. I would just want to say thank you for your attention and your willingness to listen to me in this way. And if something didn't resonate, that's no problem with me at all. You know, just take what you want from it. And I just like to, you know, in a way, open up the space and just see what you've got to say. I'm really open for whatever you want to ask or discuss. Is fine by me. So I'm not sure who's going to facilitate this, or you'd like me to facilitate it. I don't mind. It's up to you. Just the only thing I'd say is just please speak clearly, because it's always sometimes a bit tricky on Zoom or hybrid. But
thank you so much, Amaranatho. That was so beautiful, very genuine, straight from your heart to ours. Really felt that. Thank you. I'm going to open the space now for those who are here in person as well as those online. You're very welcome to speak for those in person, and also unmute yourself if you're online as well. Or if you prefer, you can also type your responses into the chat. And for those who are here in person, we have some pieces of paper and pen as well. We like to have these sessions as interactive as possible. So if you have any comments, if you have any questions or reflections, we would love to hear from you. So feel free to grab some pens and paper, and those who are online, feel free to also pop some comments into the chat. And perhaps I'll start off in terms of how this really resonated with me. I really love that concept of playful monk. When I first came across it, I was like, what is this about? So I'm really, really glad you've explained that. And I love that idea about play, because very often when people start to become more serious about Buddhist practice, we become a bit too serious. And what can happen then is we may lose steam, or it can become very difficult. So that concept of play and playfulness is so important, because it allows us to draw that interest. And I see some people nodding in the room as well. So perhaps just as a start off, would you be able to maybe share some of the exercises or some of the things that you have done in past courses, retreats or workshops? Because I'm very interested in how that is facilitated.
yes, I have a very simple practice, and I like to make these functional in the world. And my first one, probably in Australia, it's a little bit easier because of the way that the climate is when it's nice and sunny. But what I would do is just go out for a stroll in your area and look at kids and the way that they play, particularly in the children's playgrounds. Now, of course, there's all sorts of things around child protection, and I was a child protection officer at the monastery, so I totally understand all this. But it's really important, or if you've got relatives or even children yourself, to really observe how they play, particularly babies. Like I've just become an uncle just a week ago, and so I'm hoping to see my new niece soon. But what I can imagine from my my previous nephew and nieces is that that immediately they get their feet and they're putting it in their mouth and they're touching and they're playing around and they're wandering around, like they're all curious, right? So and somewhere along the line, particularly I've worked a lot in education, in our education system, that gets drums out of us, say, oh, we shouldn't be doing that, we ought to be adult. But actually, I think becoming an adult is a dangerous position, right? What I mean by that is, of course, we need an adult ego, one that takes, the ability to respond and see things clearly. But we also need to bring along that child in us, that innocence, that creativity, that innovation. And by reconnecting to children, it can really help. And if you're really brave and courageous, connecting to teenagers. We vilify teenagers because they're so scary, right? They're so scary because they don't have any boundaries, and they tell you how things are. When I ran the young person's retreats, I used to have, 30 or 40 teenagers, right? And one of the things is nothing was compulsory to do, And what I found out was they just tell you how it is. They say, I don't like this activity, it's not working. So you can either blame yourself, or you can say they've got a piece of valid information. So if they've got a piece of valid information, how might you experiment with that? So you just say, so this is not working, how might we do this? And I had quite a few teenagers, regular ones that came on retreats, that didn't participate in anything. And I used to ask them, I said, so what are you doing? He said, well, actually, I came to a retreat because I've got this exam I'm doing and I need to be in this peaceful environment. That's a result for me, not that they learned how to meditate or anything else. That's what they needed. So teenagers can be very provoking. I love them. And that energy is really fantastic. And so if we reconnect with that in ourselves at any age, then again, we can think about the boundaries, the way that we are, about the way that we relate to society, and what we might still want to do with our lives. Yeah, that's an orientation anyway towards play.
Excellent, thank you. And a follow-up question is this: how do you keep the playfulness and sense of childlike wonder alive in your life, especially in the spheres of business and the real world?
Yes. So do you know what's really interesting about just before Christmas, and why I couldn't actually give the talk last year, was that I was invited into a company, a very big company, international company, yeah, to give a workshop on feedback through play, giving effective feedback through play. And what I found was, when you set up the environment for play, people play. It's what we're all looking, you know, in some part, not in every part of our life, but we're all looking for that innocence and that creativity and innovation. And companies nowadays want innovation, right? They talk about it all the time, creativity. Well, where does it come from? It comes from this willingness to experiment and play. So what can you do in your daily life? How about just going down to the cheap pound shop or euro shop, dollar shop, buy a bunch of crayons, go to a decorator shop and buy one of those big rolls of wallpaper, right? And have that as your doodling, and just doodle with any colors, you know, just make it so that you start to get, you know, because that's what kids do. They're on the table and they get pens and they're like, oh yeah, crazy. I just show you something that's in front of my desk, right? I have that on my desk, right? Is it perfect? No. Is it playful? Yes, right? Want to show you something else? This is a true, and I actually can tell you another short story. I'm probably going to run out of time. I don't know if you can see that. Ah, no. There you go. This is a sort of Buddha image that was given to me. It's made out of beautiful wood, yeah, and it was given to me in sorry, my headphones just dropped out. Some island, Sabah, I think, in Malaysia, by a shaman. And I went to see this shaman, and I thought, oh, you know what, you know, he's probably just going to make it up, right? And what happened was, he said to me, you need to be more playful. And this was even before I started the brand PlayfulMonk. So I have this on my desk, and he's always smiling at me, like, and he's saying, take it easy, Amaranatho, you know. So even this morning, before coming to this talk, I thought, so how can I just be more playful? How can I keep it playful? You know, looking at, I'm lucky I live in a nature area. This is where I live behind me. And nature is playful. Even nature itself is creative. So it's just that a willingness to reconnect. And the word mindfulness, smrti, in Pali, is to remember. So how can you remember for yourself to allow that playfulness in?
Thank you so much. And congratulations in being an uncle as well.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So the comment in question is this: thanks for sharing the practice of the sound of silence. What a skillful teaching. My question is, how does the sound of silence develop as the practice progresses? I take it that it is paralleled with the silence of the mind. I presume then by extrapolation, one then can see in silence, taste in silence, and so on, without the mind proliferating.
Actually, completely the opposite. So the sound of silence doesn't care about your thinking. The sound of silence doesn't care about what you're doing or anything, and it doesn't silence the mind. Like when I joined the monastery, I really struggled with, I can think 10 things at the same time. I've got a very busy mind. And a lot of the meditation practices, can you still hear me in the room? Is that okay? Yeah, in the physical room was good. Okay, so yeah, I had many thoughts, right? And thinking in very diverse ways. And traditional mindfulness practice is about focusing the mind, right? And rather than focusing, and I struggled with all of that. But when I started to hear the sound of silence, that was no longer important, because it didn't matter about how I was thinking. I'm talking right now. I hear the sound of silence. I notice the breath in my body. I notice your faces. I can think about the world. I can think about the awful things that are happening right now. And still the sound of silence is there. And that gives us tremendous, tremendous space and power to be with whatever goes on. It's not the end, but it's a very important, it can be a very good adjunct to our practice to explore. So my main, if you ask me what's one of my main practices, is just to listen to the sound of silence. So here it is, right? And to notice the wisdom that arises from that, and the ability to trust in yourself to respond in that way. And of course, the sound of silence occurs when you're relaxed and open, and that's also the place of playfulness. You see, so then they go together. So you hear sound of silence, you think, oh yeah, how can I be playful? So this idea that you have to attain something, or you have to quieten your mind until it's absolutely zero still, is you don't need any of that. You just need enough, that you can start to recognize who you are. And if you're allowing your body to relax and come into its natural state, that whole idea of attainment, you can let all that go, because that's a man-made. If the practice was all about attainment and getting things, you'd be buying it in Tesco, buying it in the supermarkets. They'd be selling it to you, but you can't buy peace. You can't attain peace. You recognize it. You deeply recognize it. Okay, next question, please. I hope that was a good answer. That was a good enough answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope the connection's okay.
Yeah,
so
we're
the
getting there.
questions, excellent. There's two parts to this question. So I'll read the first part first. How can you stop biting yourself down when you fail to do something? And the second part of the question is, what can you do when you always have negative voices inside your head that always blame you if a relationship or friendship fails?
Thank you. So I guess with both of those, well, I'll start with the first one. Yeah. So when we, this idea of like failure, is that if we can actually play with failure, right? In the business world, there's this thing called safe to fail, right? And I really like it. It's called the agile mindset. But we can do that in our personal lives. That rather than looking at failure as something that lets us down, we can turn failure into experimentation, and we can learn from each one. So rather than think, oh, failure, I got it wrong, it's like, oh, that's interesting. What can I do next? Right? Otherwise, we get stuck in failure. Yeah. So this ability to bring failure into the sound of silence, like they say that experts are the reason that you have experts is that they're the people that have made all the mistakes, and that's why they get paid so much money, right? So if you think, oh, I'm doing lots of failures, then actually you're learning, you can start to learn something. And I want to say, with all these types of issues, when it becomes a really big problem for you and in your life, and you're stuck in it, really stuck in it, that's a psychotherapy, a counseling, or a coaching can really help, right? Because maybe there's something deeper going on than beyond just being able to reframe it, right? And being able to go into that in depth can be exceptionally helpful. So with blame, about blaming yourself, that one of the psychology reviews that I've read around this is that a way of working with blame is to honor yourself. So you replace blame with honor. Yeah. And that's this basic attitude of kindness, of how can you be kind? So that I'm splitting these up into two practices. One is you bring this all into the sound of silence, yeah, and you just let it be. But in order for you to do that, there needs to be a certain level of being comfortable enough with your personality. And when you're stuck in a particular pattern, yeah, and it's too tricky for you to see, it's a bit like here, you know, the pattern is so here, that's all you can see, right? But if you move your hand here, it gets smaller, right? So that's perspective taking. If your problem stays here and it's over your face, then having somebody else to help you to move that away a little bit will make it a lot easier. And no amount of mindfulness, no amount of meditation in the end will solve that. I've just not seen it in all the people that I've worked with and supported that just having a mindfulness practice will do it, right? And the reason for saying that is that it's historical within the Buddhist practice is that the Buddha learned a lot of different skills before he was a monk. A lot. Like if you imagine he went to, in our society, he went to you could say he went to a private school and got the best education, right? And what that means is that he had a lot of skills already to work with, which he may not have put in detail. And so he would have been maybe using those already. So when we get caught up in problems and we think, oh, we just use mindfulness and it doesn't work, we blame the mindfulness when actually we can use other skills. And even within the Buddhist scriptures, there's other skills they're called upaya, skillful means. And I was encouraged to use skillful means. So I'm thinking about how can you use other ways to work with it as well. But the thing with blame is to really work with honoring yourself. Next question.
Thank you. That was such a beautiful answer. I really like that practice about honoring oneself. And of course, what you said about mindfulness is so correct, is true, because mindfulness is only one of the path factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. So it's within a context, and sometimes we forget, or it's taught as if it is a separate thing that stands alone.
Exactly. That's right. It's very important that it's not a siloed practice. It's actually an integrated practice, and the Eightfold Path is actually like a piece of paper connected together. They're all connected together. They're not separate. You don't work on one and then just leave the others. They all connect together. So yeah, anyway, I can speak about that another time. Carry on.
You're welcome to come back. But thank you. That was wonderful. Yeah. Just as a follow-up, Sinsin has a really good comment as well, which he says, it's interesting to hear what you said about being playful with failures. My sister recently read an article about a highly accomplished scientist and researcher who has done so many great things. She said, people only see what I have accomplished, but rarely do they realize how many times I have failed before I eventually got there. I just didn't treat failures as failures. Instead, I see failures as opportunities to experiment with things differently. Very wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, well said. Thank you for sharing that. It's so important we hear this from different perspectives, you know, and we see that we see it in practice, you know. Yeah.
Excellent. Another question is this: how do we discern between ego thoughts and thoughts arising from deep insight and intuition?
Oh, this is I so love this question. I think it's so important, so very important. I can only emphasize getting to know yourself, really deeply knowing yourself, right? And this is the beauty of sort of how developing from a mindfulness practice, the ability to observe, the observer mind. In our mindfulness practice, yeah, we step back and we witness our thoughts. We witness all our thoughts, even our insights. But in the beginning, we start to observe ourselves, right? And that's a very powerful place of peace. It's not the end of the path, but it's a very important part in being able to recognize who we are. So when we develop this observer, we start to see our thoughts. And this book that I edited, Intuitive Awareness, Ajahn Sumedho said about intuitive awareness is really intuition plus knowing, right? So you start to actually know wisdom, and you know your personality. And the personality, as you listen more to yourself and observe yourself, it can get much more tricky, because the ego loves to take control. It loves to own the space. It loves to say, oh, that's my insight. That was mine. All that great thing that's really mine. Often I think I should record these things and listen to them myself, because what comes out now, if you're trusting in the present moment, is not yours. It's not mine. It comes out of my experience for sure, and I remember certain things, but this is not mine. So, and the way of getting to know yourself is to put yourself back into relationship. It's the quickest way. And that's why I also say coaching or psychotherapy or counseling, any of those things, puts you back into a relationship. Most of our conditioning, in Buddhism, it's the sankharas, the mental formations, were formed in relationship. So if you want to decondition yourself, which is really the path of awareness, putting yourself back into relationship will speed that process up. As a gross generalization, so please accept me, I'm saying this as a gross generalization, is that in old Eastern cultures, belonging and community was a standard thing, and so the Buddhist teaching came out of that. And in the West, we are highly individualized, which makes mindfulness very appealing, but makes community not so appealing, and being with others. And yet this is the very foundation of what we need. And the way of learning how to do that requires authenticity and vulnerability. So all the things that I did as a monk, and a lot of the things that I do nowadays, is around belonging and community and being with one another, so you can see yourself clearly. And then the more that you see yourself, then you'll know for yourself, and that's what it says even in the Buddha, you'll know when wisdom has arisen, because you'll know it. And these moments of awe, where we see something spectacular, like I love this time of the year in the Netherlands, because the sun sits low in the sky. This is not a real picture. This is a picture I took, but it's not live. But it's this time of the year. And this brings me immense joy and awe. And in that space of awe, I notice something arises, something can arise insightful. And I say, and I recognize that is insight. Not, oh, Amaranatho, isn't he fantastic? Isn't he doing the right? No, just that is insight. And then, as T.S. Eliot said, kiss the joy as it flies. No need to hold on to it. No need to even write it down, but just to notice, that was it. And the more that you notice, of course, the more that you see. It's just like saying you buy a red car and suddenly you see red cars everywhere. It's that, by that sort of association. There's some funky name for it, but I can't remember what it's called. So that you discern for yourself, because nobody else can point that out. Nobody can say, oh, that was a great piece of wisdom. I mean, you can say that, but it's yours. And your willingness to notice that and give it to yourself is also a form of self-compassion. It's not to puff up your ego, but just to know it.
Thank you so much. Another question about vulnerability.
Yes.
So the question is this: what practices can I use to stay calm and connected while being vulnerable? My vulnerable moments have been perceived as emotional or hysterical in the past. I'd like to find them out.
Wow, another fantastic. These questions are amazing. Really lovely question. And I really appreciate your openness to share even the question. So one thing that Brené Brown says is that to share vulnerability, the other person has to be worthy of it. So you also have to know yourself and know the situation when you share your vulnerability. I'm willing to come here today and be this vulnerable, because I can see the space is open for that. I wouldn't come here today and be this vulnerable if I felt I was going to get beaten around. Right. So do you see how it's a co-creation? Like we have to sense into the space and see how it is. And then if there's that willingness and openness, we co-create it. And then I think, well, okay, this is, I can be more open and vulnerable. And so vulnerability goes with actually with healthy boundaries, and healthy boundaries goes with knowing yourself and knowing what you can tolerate and what you can't tolerate. And that can always expand as time goes on. And the other thing that can be really helpful, which comes from NVC, Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, is that if you want to share something really vulnerable, do your grief work beforehand so that your vulnerability is cool, right? You be completely vulnerable, but totally cool, totally peaceful, because all the emotional stuff that goes with it, I don't like the person, I'm scared of talking, they're going to hurt, all that is gone, right? That's all reduced, and you're just going to share it in an even way. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't be hysterical either, because sometimes that's really important that people hear your passion, But it's, again, knowing your capacity.
Yes, thank you. And on that topic about knowing yourself, here's the question. Can you please talk more about knowing yourself? How do we balance with intimately knowing our mental formations and not attaching our egos to this is me and my tendencies?
Yeah. So there's this whole thing about in Buddhism about attachment, right? Like we shouldn't have attachments, right? If you speak to any mother that's had a baby, none of them will say that they're not attached to their kids, even when the mother's 85, as my mum's 82, and I'm sure she's still attached, right? So it's not getting rid of attachments. That's not the teaching. The teaching is recognizing attachments. We don't need to get rid of attachments. We just need to recognize them as they come up. And the more that you recognize them, the less that they have power. So attachments come up. I want this food, for example. Food can be easy attachment. Oh, I want this ice cream. So you take one. You think, oh, it's really nice. I'll have two. Oh, that's really nice. I have three. Three, you're sick, right? So that's the experiment. That's the playful attitude. And then the recognition is, I don't need this ice cream. I've had one that was pleasant. Yeah. And then there's certain attachments which, of course, create too many problems for us. Drugs, sex, sexual addiction, and in its high form, not in its normal function. So that's getting again to know yourself. Yeah. And this way of really seeing how the ego arises, and this space of spaciousness. Yeah, so you see all of it arise, the whole thing. Oh, I like it, I don't like it, my attachments, it's all there. Yeah. And then noticing that there might be another voice outside of that which says, oh, I want that experience. Isn't that fantastic insight? Well, what I've noticed is that wisdom itself has no recognition. Wisdom itself has no recognition. It doesn't say, oh, I need to recognize that. It just arises. It's a bit like a sword coming up from a lake. It just does that. The sword doesn't say, oh, I know myself, and isn't this brilliant? It just pops up. So it pops up, great. Or you have a really negative thought, it pops up. Well, so what? Right. But if the ego comes in, it says, oh, I want this experience. This is me. This is my experience. Oh, it's brilliant. You've done such an amazing job. You're awesome. And sometimes when we have blame and shame around us, we also need those good thoughts. Right. But that's not to conflate, to put these two things together. They're separate issues. One is about your personality and one is about awareness. Right. And getting to know that is the work. And that's why I'm saying don't make it into a fixed thing of what your mindfulness practice is, being aware of just the sensations or the thoughts or whatever, but this willingness to be in this space and not to make it an attainment and steps and goals and all this other stuff that's usually sold because it makes the practice look sexy.
Thank you.
Is that all right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a follow-up question to clarify something you spoke about earlier, someone commented that it's an interesting talk. Thank you. And they would like to ask, what does it mean to be in the relationship in terms of understanding the self?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Great question as well. So as human beings in our physical forms, we're built for relationships, right? Mainly because we came from a relationship. Every person in this room came from a woman. Every person in this room came from a woman. Well, what other relationship, what's more powerful than that? We were formed out of a relationship of two people coming together. So our inherent physical formation is based on relationship. And to ignore that is to then ignore our humanity. Our nervous, I say it again, our nervous system, yeah, it's called the vagus nerve, is based on relationship, it's called the social nervous system, right? So when you use your phone like this and look at people, your nervous system knows about disconnection. When you don't look at somebody in the eyes and have that connection, yeah, that also creates separation, right? When a baby looks at you in the eyes with that unconditional love, that it does because it doesn't have a thinking mind, yeah, we all go, oh, that's so, oh, because we're actually deeply recognized. That's the relationship I'm talking about. And so if we can bring that back into our lives, either through a committed partner or through another helper or a good friend or a partner, or even somebody that we haven't met, you can have that with. If you really open up to each other, that can happen. I mean, it doesn't necessarily work long term, but it can do something brilliant in it. I'm just remembered about, I hitchhiked for many years. I actually hitchhiked around Australia. I've been everywhere in Australia, including being a cowboy, funny enough, but that's another story. But I had these amazing conversations all over Australia because of this willingness just to be with people, and also because of that intimacy of the moment. But maybe that digresses. But you get the idea anyway. The idea is that we are in relationship. We're in relationship with our planet. And when we separate out of our planet, why do we get climate change? And why do we get the things that happen? Because we see the environment as an object rather than an intimate part of ourselves. And the deeper that we go into our practice, we see there is no separation between us and anything at all. And everything is ourselves. And so how could we separate from that? Even the most atrocious person on this planet, even the most intelligent person, the smallest animal, the smallest microbe, we are deeply connected with all of those things. And so we're always in relationship. And separating out of that is also causes us our problems because we think I, me. So thank you. It's an awesome question.
Yeah, we've been having some really good questions today. So thank you. We have another one. And on that topic about relationships and returning to the theme about playfulness, the question is this: how can one be playful with fear and anxiety? I try to accept whatever feeling has arisen and let go. However, at times of distress, it's very hard to befriend fear. Great,
yeah. So the day before yesterday, I had a very fearful moment. Yeah, it really upset me. What I used is these practices of being able to actually soothe and calm down the nervous system, right? We've got enough. Why don't we just do a little practice now and just see what that's like? Because I just share the practice. Maybe it's a lot easier rather than talking about it. We just do it. So if you just bring yourself to this, meditative mindfulness state, close your eyes, yeah, and just bring your attention to your breathing, and notice just how you're breathing. Don't try to control it. Just notice how you're breathing in and breathing out. And just what I'd like you to do is we're going to adjust our breathing now, and we're going to change the format of it. So what I'd like you to do is breathe in for 7, for a count of 7, and then breathe out for 11. So I'm going to count just as my breath, but you work out what you need to do. So it's like breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then breathe out for 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then again, breathe in for 7. And then out for 11. And again, breathe in for 7. And then out for 11. And one more time, breathe in for 7. Out for 11. And last one, breathe in for 7. And out for 11. So your out breath is longer. And then just return to your normal breathing. And notice your physiological state, how your body is. Open your eyes. And just maybe somebody'd like just to say how they feel, just practicing in that way. How was that for you?
Calming. We've got some responses here in the room.
It's a variation of 4, 7, 8 breathing. So you hold for, in your case, breathe in for 7, hold for 11, and then breathe out for 11. And that drops your systolic back to 10 millimeters of mercury.
So thank you. Yeah, thank you. So you notice, and in the comments in the chat, it says karma, relaxing karma. So what this does is it works on your vagus nerve, right? And so that is a way of reducing our fear. So if you just do that for a few, immediately you get a state shift. And your vagal tone is called, your vagal tone is your ability to deal with what comes up. And that is part of our social and relational orientation. But we can do that through our breathing. We can do it through toning and chanting. Has the same effect. And there's other exercises you can do. So sometimes you need a toolbox. I have a really big toolbox as well. So when I'm not able to access this space because the ego has taken over, I've also got this, so I just need to do a little bit, to work on my physiology for that just to calm down enough to create the space. So as I did that, then the fear comes in, I see awareness, and then that's it, it's all over. Yeah, so even though I had a very stressful day the day before yesterday, I'm wearing this thing called a aura ring, which is I use for my work, which is it measures your heart rate variability, your oxygen levels, your recovery, your ability to be ready. And on that very stressful day, my night's sleep was excellent. Right. So even though I had a very difficult day, my ability to go again the next day to be resilient was very good. So what I'm trying to say is I'm not denying my fear. I'm not trying to get rid of it or even let it go. All I'm doing is welcoming it into the space. I'm allowing it to be there and then seeing what do I need to do to be with that. Sometimes you need to use a tool. Sometimes you just need to be with it, let it go. Sometimes you just need to walk in nature. Sometimes you need to sit. But your breathing has such a powerful effect on your physiology. You can do a tremendous amount with your fear, and I often said fear is a capital F and the words ear. So it says, please listen. Please listen. Please listen to your fear, right? because if you feed fear, it's like pouring petrol on petrol, right? It'll explode. But if you're with it and you have the capacity to observe it, yeah, it can't do anything. In fact, it's a very useful resource.
Thank you. That was really, really good. And we've got someone here in person who has a question. You may want to come closer to the mic.
Yes. Yes, I was just wondering about how you use your aura ring, because I've been thinking.
I can't hear. Can you speak up a little bit louder?
To the speaker.
Yes, I was just wondering about how you use your aura ring, because I've been thinking of getting an aura ring as well, to kind of quantify whether I'm actually improving in my meditation practice or not. And I'm just curious about how a lot of the statistics on the like heart rate variability and your breath rate, do they actually map to, I guess, aspects of your depth of silence, for example?
Brilliant. So yeah, so that's a fantastic question, and I'm using it for the executives I work with, and we've got a separate, more detailed package than you get with the Aura Ring. But at the moment, I'm using the details which is given in the Aura Ring app. And what's really interesting is that during Christmas, I always do a 1 day or 2 day silent retreat every New Year's Eve, just before New Year's. I've done that for years. And this year, of course, I had the ring on. So actually, I measured my heart rate variability through the 1 day retreat, silent retreat and rest. And it just went through the roof. And I did that, so I can just say, I can tell you what my again, the resting heart rate, it doesn't always work like that. So sometimes in the meditation, my heart rate variability goes down. And then I think, well, actually, I need more physical rest, right? That it's not the time to meditate. It's actually the time to go and have a sleep and let my body recover, right? But the data is very useful. The other data I also, for me, and this is only for me personally, is that it's really helpful to see when actually I've had very good rest and my mind thinks I haven't, but actually my body is rested. So there's an element of my personality thinking, oh, this isn't how rest should look like. I've spent a tremendous amount of effort and time on developing rest. Right, when I came to Australia, I used to do these 6 month teaching tours. And they were very full on retreats, workshops, talks, endless all week. But I would have 1 day a week off, yeah, where you couldn't contact me or WhatsApp me or anything. And that was my way of actually this ability to recover. No performance athlete works at full rate. And yet as humans, or outside of performance athletes, we all think that we should be operating at this high speed all the time. No performance athlete does that. They all know you train, you work hard, you rest, you work hard, you rest. So that's an encouragement to use the ring for rest, right? If you just notice that can be so helpful, and then you can gauge how well you're sleeping. And oxygen, the new one measures your oxygen level. I mean, I'm not selling this, but it also measures your oxygen level, which is actually quite good for COVID, because then you'll know if your oxygen level goes down or you're getting ill. But anyway, you know, like, I mean, I've done 15 years of meditation without an aura ring, right? And I've got the results of that. So. But it is, you know, if you're, I've got a degree in artificial intelligence, so I like data as well. So if you're interested in data, it's one way of doing it. Yeah.
If you get one, let us know how you go.
Yeah. And drop me an email. I'd be, yeah.
Absolutely. Someone asked the question, how accurate is it?
I don't know, actually, because I can't compare it to, the oxygen level seems to be quite accurate, but I can't say that. I can only go on by what other people have said. So I don't know. There will always be, the interesting thing, of course, is you see we're getting back into facts and that, you know, who to trust. But ultimately, in the end, you have to trust yourself. Yeah. And what your level is, and what my level is are completely two different things, and how you respond to it and what you need to do with it is your business and not anybody else's business, right? So we can get again into hard data. Oh, this person meditates like this, I should do it like that, right? Or this person, you know, attained enlightenment because they did this, so I should do that. How about just starting from where you are, yeah, and seeing what you need, yeah, and let that come to you, let the practices and let all of that be there for you, rather than, you know, this is why all what I've said is for reflection. It's not about telling you what to do at all. So I have to be careful of the time, but I can probably do one other question if there is one.
What I meant to ask was, is it approved by the FDA as a therapeutic device?
I don't know that. You'd have to check it on the website. On the website, but I don't know. But if you actually look up HRV in terms of research, there is absolutely a humongous amount of HRV research about how it connects to your health. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm just aware of the time. So one last short question. And this is a question that was asked earlier, and I wanted the person just to clarify the question. So the question, I think, is how can you avoid playfulness getting another should or must?
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. Yeah, it's so easy for this thing to become a should or a must. And the only way I know how to do that is to use a double playfulness. It's a bit like doubt. So if you're a person that has lots of doubt, then the recommendation or way of working with it is to doubt the doubt, right? So if you're getting into, I ought to do play on a Wednesday afternoon because that's the right time to do it, then be playful about that and don't do it. Just think of a bolshy teenager who says, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go and play with my mates, right? Or so that actually it becomes you're even using play to stop that tendency. And the other thing, of course, is that the observer mind, to witness that thought is already power. Like people say, oh, I'm not practicing mindfulness because I'm not sitting in meditation. But if you recognize that thought, you are mindful, you are aware, right? That gives you choice. So you've already caught the thought. You've already caught the thought. So that means you can make a choice about whether you believe that or not, or how you respond to it. If you don't know that, that's ignorance.
Thank you so much, Amaranatho. That is just amazing. Oh, you had something else to say?
I know. I just want to finish off with something. So I just wanted to let you know that I want to finish off with one thing before we wrap up. But you wrap up, and then I've got one thing to do, or I can say it, and then you can, whichever way you want to do it.
Okay, all right. Well, we were going to ask you as well to lead a closing, so that would probably be an excellent time for you to do that. But I just want to say thank you. That was a really excellent session. Thank you so much
pleasure.
for sharing. Also holding space with us as well. We try to make these Metta Centre Wednesday sessions as interactive as possible to build community, build that belonging, all the beautiful qualities that you were talking about during your talk as well. And I also want to thank everyone who asked questions, participated, and was vulnerable in this as well, because it's spaces like this that makes it so much more meaningful when we have community and friendship this way. So thank you to everyone who participated today. I'm just going to pass over to Sophia, and we can do the closing.
Beautiful. I couldn't have said that better, Tina. What a beautiful session that we all shared together, mixing Buddhist practice with wisdom from different people like Brene Brown as well, vulnerability, etc. So before we close, we usually do a dedication of merits or prayer or something. Like, would you like to lead any?
I would, yes, I would love to do that. I did think about this beforehand. So again, I do also want to thank you for offering this space and being in this way together, and Tina and Sinsin for your vision. I mean, it's so beautiful to see and to come into a space like this. And often when I feel it deeply now, I feel this immense gratitude for the Buddha's teaching, for these centers, you know, particularly when they're offered freely. It's just, it's so beautiful, you know. Actually, what I thought would be really nice is if we could just finish off with a word of gratitude, and I'd actually like you, if possible, to speak it out, so that we actually hear it and take it in, as in the sense of community and belonging, as a way of completing. Before we do that, I just want to say, if you'd like to connect with me, I mainly post on LinkedIn. It's a business thing. You can find me under my name, Amaranatho. It's in the thing. I do have a Facebook thing, but I don't use it that much, or you can find me through my website. I'm always up for asking questions and that type of stuff. So that's that. So yeah, I would really like, so the way that I would like to do this is, maybe if we just again, just go to, in very, very briefly, touch into that quiet, meditative, open space that we've been talking about, and just see what word is sitting in your heart, in your mind, in your gut, whatever it is, just one word. Yeah. And actually, given the time, what I'm going to say is that we just, when I say open your eyes, we all just say the word together. So rather than go around and hear everybody's words, we'll just say it all together, and we'll finish off with a sense of shared gratitude. So just let that word resonate. If you don't have a word, think of a color. And if you need to be silent, that's okay. Okay, if you open your eyes now and say your word.
Friendship.
Love. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure, and you're most welcome to use this YouTube video. Put it on YouTube. It's no problem.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. You all have a beautiful evening, and thanks again.
Thank
See
you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
See you.
Next
Bye.
time.
Yeah,
Bye.
have a lovely day.
Bye. And you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Before everyone goes, we've got some announcements.
That's right. I was going to say, before we sign off, we've got next week on Wednesday, 7 to 8:30, Overcoming Doubt with Ajahn Sumedho. If you did come to a previous session by Ajahn Sumedho, it was an excellent one. He's an excellent speaker. So looking forward to seeing you then as well. And if you wish to subscribe to our emailing list or WhatsApp group, we've got a little community on WhatsApp. Please let us know. You can send an email to contact@mettacentre.com, or you can let any of us know on this Zoom call. You can also like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram, or the social media stuff. And if you like to also make a donation, that would be wonderful too. The details are in the chat at the very top. Hope everyone have a lovely Wednesday evening, and thank you for joining us again.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Amazing. And just letting everyone know, we have a very special event on the 28th of January, which is a Saturday, from 1 o'clock to 7 p.m. It is a workshop with Venerable Dasa, who is visiting us from Sri Lanka. So he is a very good monk. He came here late last year. Oh, was it late last year, did a session with us, so he's back again. So before he flies back over to Sri Lanka. So if you'd like to know more about that event and any other Metta Centre events, all the details are on our website. I really enjoyed today's session. It was a great way to start the year. We'd like to see all of you back again next time. And so thank you again so much. And thank you, Sophia. Great emceeing. Bye, everyone. Good evening to you all.